Hey, what is up guys, it is RB in Hardware with a brand new video. Today we're gonna build your next budget $850 gaming PC featuring only PC parts that should be fairly easy to find at stock MSRP. And in today's video, I'm gonna run you guys through the entire build process, step by step, how you can put this PC build together too, before booting the system up, testing out the gaming performance in some of the current most popular games. We're going to benchmark all games in 1080p max settings, or we're also gonna look at 1440p high to medium settings, all to give you guys an idea what to expect in case you decide to build this PC as well. You can easily find all PC parts I'm using linked up in the video description below. Now before we get into the video, hey, my name is Robin, and on this channel we benchmark and build gaming PCs using both the latest and used PC parts to help you decide what PC parts to pick for your next gaming PC. And so if that is something you're interested in, smash the like button down below and hit the subscribe button and bell icon, and let me know what price target we should target for upcoming videos. And speaking of pricing, this machine will cost you around $850 using the listed parts. Now at this $850 budget, you will be able to play and run most games with silky smooth frame rate at both 1080p and 1440p at high to medium graphics. We're going to benchmark the machine after we completed the PC build. Anyway, inside this small form factor machine, we find GTX 1660 Super, a 6-core Ryzen CPU, 16GB of RAM, a lightning fast M.2 drive, everything housed inside this tiny case from Colink with great airflow. We're gonna start with the CPU, RAM and motherboard, and for today's build I ended up picking the DS3H B550 board, this one from Gigabyte, coming in at around $100. This is a budget-oriented M.ATX motherboard that offers everything you need for your next budget gaming PC build without breaking the bank. Now the savings we make here on the motherboard guys will allow us to spend a bit more on the graphics. Time to install our processor, and for today's build I gone for the Ryzen 5 3600, coming in at $199. Now this is a 6-core CPU with SMT that's got a 3.6 GHz base clock and a boost clock that goes all the way up to 4.2. Let's take a quick look at the gaming performance with the 3600. The $200 processor is holding up great, making the 6-core 3600 a great pick for today's budget PC build. Now as we can see, a motherboard comes with a retention frame pre-installed, but since we're gonna use a cooler that uses springs, we're gonna get rid of these two plastic frames. Now installing the processor in the socket is easy. First open up the metal arm. Then we want to locate the golden triangle, which we find at the lower left side corner of the processor. These triangles should be pointing to a corresponding triangle that we find on the CPU motherboard socket. Simply turn the CPU so these two triangles match up, then drop the processor into the socket and gently move the metal arm all the way down until it locks in place, and yep, our CPU is installed. For our CPU cooler, we're gonna use this $50 Freezer eSport 32 Duo from Arctic. Installing the Arctic cooler is super easy. First we need to secure the standoffs. Then we apply a bit of thermal compound. Now we're placing the heatsink over the CPU. We then secure the heatsink using the 4 included thumb screws, and yeah, that's it for now. We're going to wait with the fans a bit until we've successfully installed the power supply. For our system memory, we're gonna go with this red, highly popular Corsair Vengeance kit, coming in at around $90. And installing these two is very easy. For optimal performance, we're gonna wanna populate the gray slots. So simply pull back the toggle for the second and 4th DIMM slot and plug them in just like so. time to install our storage, and for today's build I've gone with a budget M.2 storage device from Kingston with half a terabyte worth of space. If you want to, you can also add another NVMe drive later on, as the motherboard actually has support for 2 devices in total. So we find one of the M.2 slots right below where we install the CPU. Gently slide the M.2 unit into the socket with a 45-degree angle. Then take the little screw, hold it down just like so, and screw it down until it stops. Now we can move our whole base of our build and install it in our case. And in this video I ended up picking the Colink Citadel mesh, coming in at around $70. The Citadel mesh comes with 3 120 fans with addressable RGB support. These are all hooked up to an RGB controller, so you can control all of these using the button at the front of the case. Since the tempered glass side panel is mounted on hinges, there is no thumb screws to undo in order to access the interior, and the side panel is held in place by strong magnets. Before installing the motherboard, we're gonna need to install the I/O shield. Now this shield is located inside the motherboard box, and it goes in from the back of the case with these circular audio ports you see here located at the bottom. And with the motherboard installed, before we move on to power supply and graphics card, now is a good time to connect the chassis cables that takes care of the front audio and USB and the power button, etc. Let's start with USB 3, and this is what this cable looks like. The connector is located down at the bottom of the motherboard. Next in line we have this USB connector, and this one goes to a connector that is located right next to the USB 3. Moving on to front audio, and this cable goes to the left side corner. Lastly, we have the front panel connectors, and these can be a bit tricky guys, but yeah, just take your time. For power supply I ended up picking the 5-star rated Corsair CV550. Make sure you got the fan facing downwards, then gently slide the PSU into place and secure it. Now we're gonna do a couple of cables and wiring before we install the graphics, and first up we got the 24-pin power for our motherboard, and this one goes to a connector that we find on the mid right side. Lastly we have this 8-pin power, and this one goes all the way up to the top left side corner. With that done, we can finally go ahead and finish up with the CPU cooler. Attach both fans on either side of the heatsink and secure them. Lastly, don't forget to connect the fan power cable to the CPU cooler to the CPU fan header on the motherboard. Alright, so last guys, but definitely not least, we have the graphics, and for today's build we find a GTX 1660 Super. This is their Super SE Ultra variant, and based on the Turing architecture, the 1660 Super offers a great 1440p gaming experience at medium to high graphics. But as you can imagine, this is a 1080p monster GPU. We're gonna look at what kind of frame rate you can expect a bit later after we completed the build guys, so don't worry. Now, as all of you guys probably know by now, GPU prices are all broken, but we're hoping that this gets better as we're getting closer to summer. Anyway, plug in the graphics card and take this PCIe cable and plug it into our graphics. And what is left to do is to flip the case around, whack on the side panel, and we have officially completed our $850 budget gaming PC build. Let's fire up some games and let's have a look at what the PC performs like. So on your screen now we are looking at the performance numbers that I've gathered from today's build, and I ended up running 15 games in both 1080p high settings as well as 1440p resolution. And as we can see, for the most part reaching 60 FPS or more is what you can expect. But let's have a deeper look at some of the games tested. First up we have Horizon Zero Dawn starting at 1080p, where I went for the favor quality preset, and this results in about 65 FPS. Looking at 1440p, I went for the original preset, and here we stayed right below the magic mark with an average of 52 FPS. Next up we have Death Stranding starting at 1080p max settings. This gives us an average of 79 FPS. Moving on to 1440p, here we saw around 60 FPS, again using the highest setting that the game offers. Moving on to CSGO, once again starting with 1080p, and here I'm going for competitive settings. This results in about 280-ish FPS on average. Jumping to 1440p using the same graphic settings results in about 255 FPS. Doom Eternal is next, and here I'm opting for the Ultra Graphics preset. Let's begin with 1080p. This results in around 120 FPS. Moving on to 1440p, we saw around 72 to 80 FPS, again using the Ultra preset. Moving on to Overwatch, and here I'm picking the Ultra settings, and this results in about 104 FPS. Moving on to 1440p, and the FPS is dropping down to around 82 FPS with the same graphics preset. Valorant runs great with an average of over 200 FPS, and this is with everything maxed out. This is at 1080p. At 1440p we are seeing around 182 FPS. Last up we have Cyberpunk 2077. Let's first take a look at 1080p. Here I went for the medium preset, and this resulted in about 54 FPS, and this is with ray tracing turned off. Stepping up to 1440p, we're almost able to reach the magic 60 FPS mark at 53 FPS. Looking at the settings, you guys can see that I went for low with resolution scaling set to 90%. Again, all PC components can be found linked up down below. We now have an official Discord server up and running, and if you guys want to become a part of the community, ask questions either to me or any of the awesome people on the channel, you definitely want to go ahead and join the Discord server today. Link can be found down below. Now watch either of these two videos, and I will see you guys in the next video.